Hello, everybody. I'm Jean Latting. You're about to meet someone who understands what it feels like to belong and not to belong. She reached out to me about our book, Conscious Change, and I was so intrigued by her story and her book that I invited her here as a guest on this podcast. Here's Dr. Beth Kaplan. Hello, everybody. You're looking at Beth Kaplan, who has written this marvelous book, Braving the Workplace. I'm going to read you what she put in her opening to the book because I thought it was so fabulous. She says, I know what it's like to be unseen, unheard, and unhappy. I know what it's like to feel so much and have so much to say, but you can't find the words to express what you're going through. I know what it's like to feel tired, a deep fatigue, preventing you from absorbing joy. It's lonely, but you are not alone. We're in this together. The good news is you survived 100% of your toughest days, and I'm going to get you through the rest. So, just for credentials, y'all, Beth has her doctorate in learning and leadership strategy from the University of Pennsylvania. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about braving the workplace and why you, Beth, had such a poignant opening to the book.
Thank you.
Tell us what was behind that.
Truthfully, the way that the intro of the book got starting, Dr. Lattining, is the fact that they asked me to write my introduction at the very end. And I think you know, because you've written so many beautiful books, that by the time you're done the book, you're done the book. And I really was struggling with what to say. And then I thought to myself, who would I want to pick up this book? Who really needs to read it? And I thought about the fact that the goal of this book is to help people feel less alone. And
Mhm.
so when I started to really think about who that was, I just let my mind wander to someone that may be in the bookstore or online or just in that place that we've all been before where you just feel alone. And I wanted to remind people that they've survived their hardest days and let them know that they are not alone, that we're in it together, and that we're going to get through it together.
Okay, so Beth, what's the it? We're going
Get
to
through.
get through it together. What's the it?
I love that question. For me, the it is our sense of belonging. It's understanding what makes us us and how to really deeply hold on to that. The emphasis for the book and the context is the workplace. So if I take it a step further, braving the workplace to me means being yourself every day in a world that tells you to be something different.
That's so many people are going through that. Yeah,
Yes. Did
I
you
can't be
know
who I am.
that's right? And 96% of the country has reported that they're unhappy with their jobs. So
96%.
96%.
I just know the Gallup studies. Where are you getting that from?
I can send it to you. There was a recent poll that was put out, and then there was articles all throughout the state of Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania had the highest rate of ha unhappiness at work. And since I come
Oh,
from Pennsylvania, I was paying attention.
whoa.
Yes.
Okay, so let's back up and I'm going to ask you about your origin story. For
Yes.
you to sense that belonging is a big issue, that had to come from someplace way back when. So tell about your growing up
Hmm.
and how you got to the point of wanting to even write that book.
I think belonging was always a calling. I don't know if I had the words or the language earlier on. I don't know if many of us do. I'm always a sucker for an articulated person, but it was not me, I can assure you. And growing up, I always felt like a square peg in a round hole. And that was most times in life. And I grew up outside of Philadelphia, in one of the suburbs of Philadelphia. And I just felt the overwhelming need to be accepted. I didn't feel accepted at my home. Um, I started to feel like I had a community here and there, but I always was manipulating or changing something about myself. It probably comes from the fact that I thought that if I loved people hard enough, they would love me back. That's real
Beth,
deep.
can you pin, do you, I'm going to get
Yeah.
personal here, and if you don't want to. Okay, so I grew up rebellious, just
Mm,
questioning and rebellious in a
yes.
very stable, conforming, do what the society says do home. So that's
Yes.
why I felt like an oddball. Why did you feel like an oddball?
I was almost the opposite. Now I'm such a rebel. I mean, you know this already about me. But for me, I was very type A, very extroverted, but it may surprise you to know I didn't really talk in school until I was in third grade.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, I would be a chatterbox at home and then say nothing during school hours. And I felt completely uncomfortable in my own skin. I grew up with a very sick father and an abusive mother. So for me, I just was searching. And as I said, I thought if I love them hard enough, they're going to love me back. And it was really hard to be that person. So I mistakenly thought my sense of belonging came from fitting in, trying to please other people. And as I grew up, that just didn't work for me. I found that the better my relationships were with people, the goofier I was, the more fun I was, and the more like myself. It became almost a calling for me to gather and bring people together. At the same time, I got more and more confidence when I realized I didn't have to change anything about myself. I only had to be myself. And that's my background around belonging.
Okay, so how old were you when you realized being yourself was the ticket?
Oh my goodness, I want to say every day.
How
Now,
old were you?
um, I would say when I really learned the lesson of belonging, I would say it was no more than maybe 5 years ago, and I'm 47. I'm happy to share my
So this
age.
is recent. This is
This
not
is recent.
college.
No, this is so I'll tell you what happened. I was in the workplace. I needed a change. Like many people, I had a phenomenal work experience with a boss that I wasn't doing as well with. Decided to go to grad school and really find out who I was. And my doctoral dissertation essentially became my personal rewrite, except for I didn't know what story I wanted to tell, and I didn't know how to tell it. And then this is really what happened. We were in class talking about surviving and thriving, and I was listening and listening. And I remember very distinctly one of my professors talking about cooperation and collaboration. And I just raised my little hand and I said, hey, this is the thing. When employees are in one-on-one settings where all their strengths and their weaknesses are laid bare, it doesn't feel like you can speak truth to power, right? You always hear the mantra, don't take it personally, but how could you not?
I don't like that phrase.
No, I really dislike it. Everything is personal. And so for me, the conversation became about membership and it became about attachment. And then it almost felt like the word belonging went thundering through me. But the more and more I talked about it, the more I disagreed with everyone about what they were talking about because it was a very finite thing. And I soon came to realize that belonging is really complex. It's not the new inclusion, it's not diversity, it's not equality, it's very different. And it's almost insulting to all of those contracts to name it something different. So for me, it became a calling and a journey. And I really started to get more and more confidence after I started to take it and define it, redefine it, if you will.
Okay, so let's get academic for a minute just so we
Yeah,
can distinguish the terms. What's the difference between belonging and inclusion and the other terms? How do you separate those things?
I love that so much. For me, the difference, it comes down to self. I believe that while belonging is a feeling, and someone may tell you you belong or you don't, you may feel different. Just because you're included doesn't mean you feel like you belong. And if you don't define your own sense of belonging and feel a belonging to yourself, you're going to remain beholden to someone else's definition. Inclusion is something that another person tells you, and belonging is something you determine for yourself.
Inclusion is something other people tell you, and belonging is something you feel for yourself. And
Yes.
considering your background, I can absolutely see how that distinction would be important to you because probably people claim to be including you all along, but you
Yes.
didn't feel it.
There's so many examples, right? I mean, I have a 17-year-old going through the college admissions process, and he feels very strongly about acceptance into a specific school or two. And what I've asked him to really stop and consider is the difference between inclusion and belonging. You may feel very strongly that you are a Penn State Nittany Lion. What happens if you apply and you don't get in? Does that mean you don't belong, or were you just not included? And then what happens if you apply again and do get in, right? Does it mean you
Right.
belonged any less the first time? Probably not. It just means that someone is now allowing you to be part of that institution.
And you said you have a 17-year-old. Is this your
I do.
child? This is literally
This
a
is
kid.
literally my child. That's
Okay.
right. And so we talk about this all the time because I think from a mental health perspective, it's really important to know the difference. Just because you're included does not mean that you have to feel like you belong somewhere. And just because you feel like you belong doesn't mean you're going to be included.
Well, that hurts.
It does. It
We
can hurt,
want to
right?
be included and we want to belong.
Yes. And it opens up a deeper conversation because there are so many different types of belonging. And some of it's partial, some of it's full. I mean, personally, I have 3 gym memberships. I feel varying levels of degrees of membership to each one of them. And by the way, not to some of them as well. So that's okay. In many academic circles, though, that's a new concept.
It's a new kind. What do you mean you have three physical workout
I
gym
do.
memberships?
I do. I have a group of ladies I work with out with at 6:30 in the morning. And then I also have a trainer separately. And I go to that gym. And then I go to one that I don't know why I just have to stop paying for them at this point.
Okay, so tell me this. What's the point you're making? This gym membership is a very concrete example. What's
It
the
is a
point you're
great
making there?
example because I'm included in all, right? And at the same time, I have a deeper sense of belonging to 2 of them out of the 3. The third, I don't even bother. I have to stop paying for it. The other 2, I have varying degrees. So it's a great example of how we can feel different sense of belongings, partial compared to a greater whole, which for a long time, the only thing we talked about is you belong or you don't.
Okay, do those two different gyms bring out different parts of you?
They do. One of them is a group of women I work out with who, oh my goodness, do they light me up? They really do. They're just wonderful. It starts my morning. I can't think of a better way. My trainer that I will see, and when I go to that gym, makes me feel empowered in a completely different way. Truly.
Okay, so what you're saying then is belonging can is it's not so much different types of belonging as different expressions of yourself
Can be. Yes.
that's bringing out those of the feeling of belonging.
I'm going to add one more complexity to that, that
Okay.
sometimes it doesn't necessarily even have a feeling you're bringing out of yourself. It could be an aspirational feeling as well, right? We have something called sacrificial belonging, where you think that by giving up a part of yourself, it's going to either strengthen your sense of belonging or it will lead to something greater. When we know that's not ever the way it works out, but we want so badly to feel that way.
Yeah, sacrificial belonging is if I suck up enough, maybe they'll accept me. Is that what
Right.
that is?
It can. I mean, I think, for lack of a better phrase, there's so many organizations that have that as a motto, right? I mean, and I mean no disrespect to
Oh, take one
any
for
of
the
them.
team.
Take one for the team, shipmate self, right? And those work in certain contexts, but it never works when you have to give up a part of yourself to be part of something larger than you. Never.
A lot of people right now are faced with that agony
Yes.
of do I stay in this organization that
Yes.
I think has betrayed my values,
Yes.
or do I leave? And if I stay, what does that say about me?
Hmm.
What's your response to that? How would you advise someone going through that to think about what they're going through?
My first instinct when you said it is you do you. Here's the thing, the only person that can really determine your outcome is you. So you have to really weigh out the pros and cons. I wish I could tell everyone out there that if you're not happy to leave something, but that's not really going to do it. I mean, most of us, not we all, need to make a living. And your work is tied to livelihood. It's irresponsible completely for me to say, leave that job. That being said, it's weighing things out. You do not have to be the corporate cheerleader. That's the other thing. You don't have to be all in. As long as you get your job done and you do it to a degree that is satisfying you and your employer, maybe you want to think about tailoring back if something is not meeting your values and you cannot leave the company. The other thing to know, if you say to yourself, no, I'm just going, that's it, I'm leaving, I quit, doesn't mean that any of the things that you're going through are left resolved. In fact, if you do not resolve any of the trauma from the workplace or any relationships, they come with you.
Oh, that's the truth.
I'm so
Yes.
sorry to tell anyone out there. I wish it was not that difficult, but it is. In fact, we carry with us up to 5 managers at all times. You
Oh,
can
really?
Oh, yeah. And by the way, workplace PTSD can last 5 to 15 years. If it lasts less for you, fantastic. Um, a lot of people have a lot of shame about that. And I think that stems from the fact that they believe their trauma is less than if it comes from the workplace. I'm going to
Oh,
tell
they
you,
don't give
trauma is
credit.
trauma. Yeah,
Oh, so it's workplace trauma, therefore I should get over it because it shouldn't be personal.
it's just a job. That's right. When we know that's not true. I mean, I would love to tell you that when you punch out, even if that's just metaphorical, you never really leave. And I think nowadays it's a bigger discussion because we don't get our sense of belonging from the places that historically we did, which were religion and community and family. So the workplace has really become a destination for that because we spend so much time there.
Yes. And for some people, that's their community.
That is. How many times have you heard my coworkers feel like a family?
Right.
I would love that statement if you were able to fire your family. But and by the way, some of us would love that, but that's not the truth.
Yeah.
So it's really something to think about. And to know that if you are staying at a job because you are tied to a livelihood, there is no shame in that. There is not. There are ways to get around it to make yourself feel at peace with it. And I always like to call them your belonging moments. Music is a wonderful thing to think about. I don't know about you, but I go into the car and immediately it's high school, all my high school jams come on, and I feel like I'm in another place in time. I recommend things like that for people because there are happy mediums. It does not have to be as miserable, but you have to actively seek that happiness. Happiness is a choice in this one.
You have to actively seek that happiness.
You do. You do. And not feel so bad about it when there's things that are outside of your control. What you can do is implement boundaries. I love boundaries. But the thing to know about boundaries is you can only control yourself. It's not like I'm putting boundaries in place for you to follow. You can't expect that. It's not going to work. So you need to put boundaries in place for you to live the life you want to live.
Well, that's something that people have said, I have a boundary. I've heard people, I have a boundary. I can't discuss that. And I'm thinking, well, that doesn't work for me. I mean, you could have your boundary, but the sacrifice, there's a price because it doesn't work for me.
That's right. And that's what they have to determine. If I set a boundary and you say to me, Beth, that's not going to work for me, I have a choice then. My choice is what I'm is this a hill worth dying on? Right? There are so many things you can ask yourself, but it is important that you communicate it back to the other person. For example, I don't take calls between the hours of 5 to 7. Reason being, I like to have that as family time. I'm sometimes cooking dinner or my kids are with me. I never want them to feel like the workplace is more important than them. If I take a call between 5 to 7, that's on me. So I make it very clear to the people around me that if I don't pick up during that time frame, then I'll call them back after.
Cool. And have there been exceptions to that?
Yes, I would love to tell you that I hold true to every boundary, but I'll tell you, if I see my boss calling, I do get a little nervous, right? Because I want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can. But I've stopped that behavior because I've had that conversation with my boss. I've told that person, I am tempted to pick up the phone. It is really hard for me. And guess what? It worked. I don't get calls between 5 and 7 from a boss anymore. It's great.
So you communicated that. What I have done when I've set up phone stuff, I said, call me twice.
Hmm.
If you call once and I don't answer, I might not answer for whatever reason. If it's urgent, call me back.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
then, yeah, and so that has helped me with what you're talking about. Okay, I'm going to go back to you describing the early you
Mhm.
who thought if I love hard enough,
Yes.
if I'm agreeable enough,
Yes.
then they will accept me.
Hmm.
Now we're talking the adult you about boundaries
Yes.
and the importance of family and other things that are important to you. For people who haven't gotten there yet, how did you get from there to here?
Mm. There's a lot of deep stuff in there. I will try to make it brief. I truly believe I learned best by not doing enough for myself, by suffering through the sacrifice of myself. So I was very willing to give up parts of myself to be liked. And guess what? Came time where it didn't even matter. It didn't work. And ultimately, I wasn't getting the relationships in life that I needed to thrive. I found myself giving and giving and wondering why I wasn't getting the same level back. So many of us out there do that. And then, truthfully, I probably would have still kept going with that. But for me, it really came down to my older son. I believe we've talked about this briefly, but he was diagnosed with lung cancer. And so for me, when you have a child that is going through chemotherapy, he wasn't allowed to be around other people. He could not risk everything about him being compromised, his immune system. So I really had to sit with myself. I had a long time to sit with myself and really figure out why the things in life I was trying so hard for were not serving me, and had to prioritize his health. And I believe it changed me. It changed me for the better. I prioritize differently. I don't sacrifice things that make me me. And I have raised a family that also does the same. Now, there are a lot of imperfections that come with that. And I think for me, the key is to embracing them, really. I'm flawed just like everyone else, but I have started to learn to love those flaws. And that's for me what really changed.
Oh, so you had to make a choice of how to spend your time.
I did. That's right.
And you had sitting with a sick child,
Yes.
which I've done, not as sick as yours, but I've sat with a sick child. You have a
Yes.
time to think.
Yes.
And so you had to say no
I
a
had to
lot more than you were probably comfortable saying no.
that. And then when I was able to get out of the house and not be with him, I had to choose very wisely of who I spent that time with. So I had a real time to learn what my worth was and what I wanted it to be, and realizing that if I was going to accept people putting me into a smaller box, that was going to be on me, that I didn't want to play small anymore. I just wanted to be myself. And that's what
Oh,
happened. Yeah.
that's so beautiful, Beth.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, thank goodness my son is very healthy and happy. Um, that was really a struggle because all I could do was think about his future. And you and I know that's where anxiety starts when you when you don't know what's going to happen in the future. So for me, I kind of had no choice. And at the same time as when I started to read Brene Brown's writing and that shame and vulnerability that I had tried so hard to push down wasn't working for me anymore. I realized that the shame I was carrying wasn't my own. I could let it go. And that my vulnerability was an asset. It was not something I should hide anymore from people. And that's what I did. And it was hard. Oh my goodness, was it hard? It was counter to every part of my being because I'd spent most of my life pleasing other people.
What does hard look like? Make that
Mm.
visible. What does that mean?
Ooh, hard for me was a lot of loathing. It was, is this real or is this a story I'm telling myself? And that is a phrase I use every day. My children use it every day. Everyone around me uses it because I learned that I was so obsessed with the coulds, the shoulds, and the woulds. And every day I would consciously stop myself at that point. If a should or would or could came out of my mouth, and I'd redirect. And that was so powerful because I stopped those behaviors. I would, I don't remember the exact mantra, but I would start my day telling myself I was enough and that though the day may be hard, it wasn't going to get the better of me every morning. And then I would go in and see that sick child and had to remind myself that he was more than cancer. And we would pick up our day. And truthfully, he was such a joy that it helped. I was lucky in that sense that he was so joyful, through all that sickness.
So you deliberately reprogrammed yourself.
I did. And I started to read your books, and that helped quite a bit. I really looked at change as something that could be reframed. And when you have that possibility, it's endless. And for me, that's what happened. That's what I did.
Beth, that's so admirable.
Thank you.
So many people aren't willing to go through the work of that because it's they number one, they think they don't have time.
Mm,
And number two, they think they're doomed.
mm.
I have a friend who just said it doesn't matter what I do, nothing's gonna ever work for me. I'm just going to have to just live my life as best I can. But so that's a decision that nothing I can do will make a difference. And
Yes,
you made a different choice.
I did. An active choice, and one that is still day to day. If you think about it, self-loathing becomes an addiction. It really does.
It is an addiction, yes.
And I was just tired of hating myself. I was tired of believing this narrative, by the way, that I probably was the only person that believed it. And it was about me. And if you really want to change the way you feel about yourself, you have to start thinking differently about yourself every day.
That's what it is. Listening to you thinking, okay, she has her mantras, but what is it? It is the decision to think differently about yourself.
Yes. Yes.
People, we go back and forth. People, do I change? Do I pretend? Do I fake it till I make it?
Mm.
Oh, you're saying no. I say no too, but
I
explain
do
why
say
you're saying
no
no to that.
because the part of the faking it is really hard. I find that it's way too much effort with such a small return. I don't like the idea of faking it. I don't. I mean, it's very rare that you will come across me telling you yes to fake that you need to fake it. And by the way, it's never for a positive reason. It's not.
Okay, but you did something equally hard
Yes.
by making a different decision, making the decision to make a decision about
Yes.
yourself.
Yeah. And I would say I'm not one of those people that makes New Year's resolutions once a year. I probably do it monthly. Like this month, I wake up in the morning and I need to give myself a compliment every day, and it's very hard for me to do it, but I do. Walk by the
Well,
mirror, I'll say,
you have, I
"Good
call it
girl."
taking myself on as a project. I took myself on as a project.
I did, and that's right. I mean, I literally will look at the mirror and I'll say, "Looking good," and it makes me cringe so deeply, but I'm starting to feel it, and so it works. And so I would say to anyone out there listening, if you're trying to rewire your brain, start talking to yourself kinder. That's really one of the things that's going to help do it.
That is exactly what is going to help do it.
Yes,
Because nobody can say anything that you'll believe if you don't allow yourself to believe it.
that's right. That's right. And there are a lot of doctors out there that believe that is one of the obstacles to weight loss, to sleep prevention, to all these different things that happen to us in the physical form, is that when mentally we can take care of ourselves and speak kinder, then our body starts to accept it as reality.
There's research that says that negative self-talk, I don't think if they put it that way, but not believing in yourself, feeling isolated, not belonging is at the root of prejudice,
Yes.
right? If I can't love myself, then those folks over there, they're not the kind that I should associate with either. I have more anger towards those other people if I have anger towards myself.
Right.
I have loathing toward those other people if I have loathing toward myself. So
Yes.
one of the ways to help eradicate prejudice, which is paradoxical, is to be kind to people that you disdain.
Yes. I love that so much. And if you think about it, you can't get to love through hate usually. Love comes from love. So that makes complete sense to me.
Okay, so let's go back to your book.
Okay.
A supervisor, you have just told managers,
Mhm.
you can't make someone feel like they belong.
Right.
Now what?
I always tell people the phrase "you belong here" kind of really irks me because it feels like a lie. It's imposed belonging. It's performative belonging. If you are a leader out there that really wants your team, your peers, your boss, anyone around you to feel it, you need to do one simple thing. You need to care. Care is the number one thing that people want from their supervisors and their leaders. I don't, whether it be a frontline leader all the way up to the CEO.
They don't pay me to care. They pay me based on my numbers.
I'm going to guarantee that if you care, you're going to get paid more because the happier the employee is, the happier their sense of belonging. But the way that you do that through care is a really big spectrum. So a lot of people think about care and they think of thoughtfulness when they think of care. I think that care is such a big spectrum that you could say care is kindness, is, sorry, let me take a step back. You could say that clear is kind, being open, saying, these are my boundaries. This is what I hold myself to. This is why I will respond to you in this way. So when you're communicating with clarity. Also, care could be care to speak your name in a room of opportunities that you're not in. That's a big care. And my favorite form of care is meeting people where they're at. So, belonging to me is a very individual experience. And if you want people around you to feel a sense of belonging to you, to your workplace, to your book club, to anything, you have to learn a little bit more about them and what makes them tick. That doesn't mean if you're in the workplace that you need to know, your employee's blood type. It just means that you need to know them outside of this little box here. you know, you may need to know that they have a family outside of the workplace or that they've got 3 gym memberships or any of these different things. But knowing them a little better helps your relationship, helps your care, and it boosts your productivity. So let's just say you're out there and you say, okay, great, but I'm not sure how to do that. What I would do with your employees is I would say, we haven't talked about this for a while, but what are the last 3 things that you liked that a leader did for you? And then the opposite, what are 3 things that you like that you didn't like that a former manager did? Eye-opening. It really, I mean, it changes your entire work dynamic. At the
Okay,
same
so
time,
they're asking their employees about their previous manager.
they are. That's right. And then I'll give you one better. Tell them what you liked about your last set of employees without using names. You don't want to do that. But you might want to say, I loved when so and so would send me a weekly recap of all the things that they accomplished. And at the same time, they would tell me the top three things they needed me to do for them or the interference they needed to be removed. So this is a reciprocal thing. In order to be one of the leaders that cares, you have to also realize that learning is bidirectional. You learn just as much top as you do bottom. In fact, sometimes I would go to say that more towards the bottom for sure.
The part of me that agrees with you is at one point I had a niece and a daughter who were teenagers, and they told me everything that was wrong about myself, and it really helped. I didn't want to
Did
hear,
it?
who wants to hear from some mouthy teenage girls, but, but it improved me.
Did
It
it?
improved me because they were on target.
But I mean, there's so much you can say about that. It makes me want to say, thank God you had them. But at the same time, it's just, yeah, I know. I've been there.
Yeah.
17-year-old son.
Yes. Okay, so that's an exercise. I want to break down this care business.
Yes.
I have clients under immense pressure to perform.
Yes.
Numbers, short-term quarter gains, all of that they're under. You're injecting care in the midst of all of that.
I am.
Tell them why they should bother.
You
You
should always,
said care leads to productivity. The intervening variables are missing here. How
I have a
does care
question.
lead to productivity?
When you think about it this way, would you rather do something for someone that you like and that you feel cared for, or would you rather do for something for someone that knows very little about you and doesn't treat you very nicely, right?
That's so cool.
I mean, it comes down to that. There, there's a firm set of leaders that believe that you should not be friendly with your employees.
Right,
You should not be loyal to them. The reality is you can't be loyal to something that can't be loyal back. But most of your employees want to be loyal to you. They want to. If they are not, it's typically because there is a mismatch of values or a mismatch on care or a mismatch. I'm going to add a third, a mismatch of expectations. I've had leaders in the past explain to me what rewards look like in the workplace, and they were completely different than what I thought they were. And that's extremely important to be on the same page. Some may tell you, oh, I can give you more money, but I never can promote you. That's an example. You may have felt that the reward was promotion. Sometimes it's not either or. I'd love for all of you, by the way, out there listening to be promoted and get more money. But it's not always the same communication. What's in here is not always what's in there.
right.
Yes.
Okay. So what do you do with a underachieving employee? I'm managing an unachieving person, and I've told them to do this, and they keep messing up the same thing. How how can I show they're good over here, lousy over here? If I average it out, they're underperforming, not bad enough that I'm going to fire them, but just lousy enough that they piss me off.
There's a
How does care fit in that? How does belonging fit in that?
That's a really great question. I've never been asked that one. My gut tells me that if you have an underperforming employee, first of all, you have to understand where the performance is at and what's most important. And you also need to get to know them just a little bit better. There's so many things that could be going on. Were they a top performer and their performance has slipped? Or have they always been this way? So understanding where they're at, and then my gut instinct would be to have the values conversation. Dr. Ladding, I'd like to know more of what's important to you. And then let's just say you said to me, Beth, I really love all things the color red. I would then actively, as a leader, try to bring more red into your life. I would, because that you need to meet the person on where they're at by showing them that you care. It comes all the way back to care again. But I would literally try to work in what you know is important to them. That's how trust is also built. And do it in a way that's authentic, not just because you want something from them. That being said, if you have a low performer that's always been a low performer, you also have to know if you need to move them up or out. That's the truth. It's not always going to work, but on the spectrum of care, you need to put the effort to get there to know them better. I would be very surprised if that happened and if they were capable, if they didn't start to change their tune.
Okay. So you put that, I can see it more easily in the classroom. You're
Yes.
the teacher, and there's a kid sitting in the back who doesn't say much and doesn't do their and hands in sloppy work. Then if I find out what's going on with that kid,
Yes.
they may improve their performance. So that I can see that so easily in the classroom.
That's right. Think about the all the kids that unfortunately slip through the cracks. Sometimes it's just a conversation or two to get them started, for them to know that you want to know about them, that you value them or care about them. It, how many people have had that story in life? I have. I told you I didn't talk very much until I was in third grade, but it was really fourth grade, and I had a teacher who didn't see me talking very much, and tried to crack the shell. That's what happened. It turns out she was in Japan the entire year before. I happened to have wanderlust at a very, very early age, and all I wanted to do was explore the world. So she could barely get much out of me. And then I do remember her sitting with me from time to time and talking to me. We got on the topic of travel, and I haven't stopped talking since. That's really what
Oh,
happened. Yeah.
that's fascinating.
Yeah, I actually thanked her in the back of the book. I don't know if she's ever probably known that she had that much impact on me, but seeing this person so free and able to put a smile on every day and liked what they were doing, that was huge. And she took the time to listen to me, and it made all the difference.
That has happened so many times. You're so right. And I can see it in the classroom and in the school setting.
Yeah.
I got to wrap my head around the managers I know who are feeling the pressure to perform
Yes.
and the pressure to get the people who are reporting to them to perform. And
Yes.
so in the process of reviewing the documents and looking at the numbers and all of that, there's no time for caring.
That's right. Or you feel that there's not time. But that is one of those things where you need to play the long game. You really do need to take a step back and ask yourself if 20 minutes is really going to make or break you.
Okay. Well, this has been wonderful. What is it that you would like that people should know that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet?
Hmm. Well, I could go on and on about how much of a fan of your work and how much your work has influenced me, which is absolutely true. I tell everyone to pick up your books because to me, the actions and insights that I gain for them have been invaluable.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. I mean it with my whole heart. And I reference it throughout the book because I do believe, as we started our conversation, that change scares people. It really does. Um,
Not going to change. Yeah.
no, that's right. And I went from the opposite of you. Instead of being rebellious, which I do believe I probably was by birth, just kept it in, I became this person who I always describe as a recovering people pleaser, truthfully. So to me, I want people out there to pick up this book when they feel alone. Hopefully, it'll make them feel less alone, and to remember that we're in it together. Truly, it's probably described a little more like self-help, but I believe that that is just because we do need to look a little inward first, and then I'm hoping it starts more of a movement to really start helping one another.
Wonderful. So, how can people reach you, Beth?
You can reach me through drbethkaplan.com and through
Spell
LinkedIn.
that.
Sure. It's drbethkaplan.com. Or through LinkedIn. I have a newsletter that I know you subscribe to as well around belonging at work. And then, of course, you can always reach me through any of the various things that are in the book. In fact, there's a book club back here and tons of questions so that we can always keep the conversation going.
Okay, last question.
Yes.
What are anywhere from 1 to 3 takeaways that you want to make sure the people listening get?
You cannot belong to something fully until you belong to yourself.
Oh, yes.
That's one. Um, Inclusion and belonging are sisters, not twins. That's one of my favorites. That's how we started talking, right? The best part is that you were debating with me and I loved it so much, truly. But that's one thing. And then care, right? We talked a whole lot about care, knowing that it's just a big spectrum. And if you want to change the relationships in your life, you have to care back. I always say in order to want to have friends, you have to be a friend. And the same thing is true with care.
I want to just tack on something about the care.
Yes.
A lot of people, I've heard them say, I care, and they say it in a stony face with no body movement, and there's no demonstration of care. It's
Yes.
just something that's internal. What what would you say to that kind of a person?
If you don't put action behind it, it's going to feel careless.
There we go. Thank you, Dr. Beth Kaplan. This has been a
Thank you.
delightful conversation. I've got two big takeaways from today. The first one really hit me. As Beth says, you can't belong to something unless you belong to yourself first. When she said that, I thought immediately about the times when I felt like I belonged and when I felt I didn't belong. And the difference didn't come down to how I was treated necessarily. It was whether I put myself as one of them or not one of them. When I thought I was not one of them, I was into social comparison. Oh, this person is doing this. Oh, look how cool this person looks, or how well they explain themselves, or how they handle this or that. I did all of that and put myself as someone who just did not measure up. But when I belonged, I placed myself in the position of belonging. That didn't happen. I was just there. I was one of them, and there was no need to compare anything. We were all together doing whatever it was we were doing, talking about whatever it was we were talking about. The second thing that struck me was how Beth deliberately decided to change how she thought about herself. She took herself on. She didn't decide she was hopeless, the situation was hopeless. She took herself on and sought to change her thinking about herself, and it worked. Thanks for listening. You can find out more about Beth in the notes below this podcast, and I appreciate you listening. Conscious Change has now been out 4 months, and we hope you will go and order it from wherever you get it online or go to your bookstore and ask for it. That's even better. Thanks for listening.